I'm Cory.
And I'm Wallace.
And we're an early retired couple that are traveling the world. At the moment, we're in Kuta, Bali, Indonesia. And today we're going to do something a little different. We spent 3 months in Malaysia, and we're going to kind of give you our feedback as to what we learned, what we liked, what we didn't like so much, just so that you guys have like a better idea if you're thinking of going there.
Yeah, just our thoughts on things that, we, like I said, like things we liked and didn't like, and maybe just things that would have been good to know in advance of us getting there.
Mm.
So we'll dive in. We've got just a few items. Number one, things we liked, the people there.
They're incredibly friendly.
Yeah, incredibly friendly and kind. Pretty much everywhere we went in Malaysia, didn't really get as much of that vibe of being sold to all the time, and people were just genuinely really kind, which was just absolutely lovely.
And when it came to, like, I know this doesn't apply to majority of people, but being gluten-free, when it came to eating out, I encountered some amazing service, particularly in Georgetown. But it was just the people who understood gluten-free really did go out of their way to take care of me. So that was really nice.
Absolutely.
And the next thing that we really took advantage of is the medical care. Holy. I am someone who used to work in medical care in Canada. I can't speak highly enough of the medical care in just Malaysia in general. We had watched a lot of videos on medical care in Malaysia in particular, and we had decided that we were going to do like our regular checkups and dental care in Malaysia, and we did, and we do not regret it.
No, the medical tourism in Malaysia is top-notch. We ended up going to Gleneagles Hospital in Kuala Lumpur and did their full comprehensive medical checkup package. So it was all arranged. We made appointments to do it all in one day, and they take you through. Once you register, you go through department to department, and you get everything done. It's so comprehensive. We had blood tests done.
Blood, urine, X-ray, chest X-ray. I had a mammogram, both 3D and ultrasound. He had ultrasound as well.
Like abdominal ultrasound, yeah. Cardiac stress test.
I think there's a few other things that we're missing in there. But then, okay, guys, like seriously, we started at 8 in the morning. We were done by 11. We saw the doctor at 2 o'clock.
Yeah, just after lunch.
And she went over all of the results. And we got to keep all the results.
So they take you through department to department. It's very organized. You go from one test to the next, and it's just, they've got such a great system. They run you through everything. And yeah, like Cory said, by 11 o'clock we were done. We, went off to go grab some lunch and just relax for a couple hours. And by 2 o'clock, we're meeting with the doctor in the afternoon, both of us sitting down with the doctor and getting this booklet that's got all your results, like everything, that's, wrong with you, all in one shot. And doctor's answering all your questions, telling you, next steps, like, oh, you should see,
like if you
this
need
type of doctor,
or
make a referral for this. And coming from Canada, guys, it is so incredibly efficient to do. In Canada, if let's say we weren't feeling well and we went to a doctor and they ended up ordering all these different kinds of tests for us, realistically, 6 to 12 months it would probably take to have all that stuff scheduled and done through our public healthcare system. Now, granted, we did have to pay for this testing in Malaysia. It was not expensive, and not by Canadian standards, and it was all done in one day.
And the other thing that we did vaccines. We did all our travel vaccines there, which I am very thankful for, because had we done that in Canada, it would have been like pulling teeth to get like it done in a timely manner. We had all we had to do was have a doctor consult. We did our vaccines. We had to do them in stages. So we did some vaccines in Kuala Lumpur, and then we did some vaccines in Georgetown. Side note, if you go to Malaysia for medical care, do not go to Georgetown. That hospital was terribly run. We went to the Glen Eagles, and it was very much like Canada and very anxious.
It was a very busy day there,
Yeah.
so maybe that's what was causing those issues. But yeah, the Glen Eagles in Georgetown was nowhere near as efficient as the one in Kuala Lumpur. So Kuala Lumpur definitely wins. The reason we had to go and split those up is, of course, some of those vaccines you have to do 30 days apart between the first shot and the second shot and so forth. And that's why we ended up having to split those up. We're not entirely done yet. We've still got one round of our rabies vaccine. Dengue fever vaccine that needs to be done. But because of the timing on the second shot, that one we'll end up doing when we are in Thailand.
And the other thing that we took advantage of was dental care. We booked that when we booked it, and like 2 days later we were in and doing a cleaning. We just did a cleaning, but it was so easy, and the care was just as top notch as Canada, and it was super cheap.
Yeah, the quality of the dental care was top notch, and the actual cleaning itself in Malaysia is not even done by a dental hygienist because that profession isn't an approved discipline, I guess, in Malaysia. So the actual dental cleaning is done by the dentist himself or herself in Cory's case. And they were very thorough, checked over we had our x-rays from our dentist in Canada. So they looked all that stuff over, so that they had all the history. And yeah, it was top notch. And again, it was very affordable compared to if you had to pay for that service yourself in Canada.
And yeah, so that's our take on it. And hopefully that helps you guys if you're thinking about doing medical tourism. I wouldn't hesitate.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the other note, if you're worried about like the education, a lot of the doctors that we saw were UK based.
Trained.
Or UK and Australia trained.
Yeah.
So
a lot of their medical certificates, like hanging on the walls, are from universities. Yeah, in like most of them in the UK, as far as I could tell. So very, very high standard of care all around in Malaysia that we encountered. So the next thing that was a plus in our books was the food in Malaysia in general. And for me, a highlight of that trip, of course, was Georgetown. Bottom line is the food scene in Malaysia is awesome. Malaysian food is delicious, but if it's not your cup of tea, they've got international food from all over the place. Like pretty much anything you would want is available. And the street food scene is pretty great as well. When we were in KL, we went to Jalan Alor a few times, and the restaurants and the street food there were amazing. Thoughts on that, Cory?
My thoughts are a lot different than his. Being gluten-free, being celiac. Kuala Lumpur, super easy. Georgetown, super easy. Kota Kinabalu, a little harder for me. Obviously we could go. We have to have a kitchen in most of our stays. So we were able to go to the grocery store and get basics, but beyond basics, like I'm talking like vegetables, chicken, fruit. It was a little bit more challenging. Two things to note if you are gluten-free. In Malaysia, they don't have as strict a policy with regards to identifying all the ingredients in packaging or in their...
the ingredient labels.
Yeah. So I couldn't trust Malaysian food in general if it was packaged. So a lot of the things I bought were from like Australia or New Zealand. They seem to import from that. So I'm thankful for that, but it's a struggle because I would love to have Malaysian food. Part of travel is to discover food I unfortunately do not get that luxury.
Yeah. And so food for us is one of the things we liked about Malaysia, but also falls on our list of things that weren't as great, especially for Cory. Like she said, some challenges there if you need to be gluten-free or if you have any other dietary issues. We did find the food labeling to be a little lacking compared to what we're used to back home, which did cause some difficulties. As well, like Cory said, finding gluten-free options in KK, like in Sabah in general, was a lot harder. So she had a much tougher time, eating good food on that leg of the trip. Up until then, it had been pretty good, I think.
Georgetown was definitely the highlight with regards to gluten-free food. Again, we were sticking to like more expensive restaurants, which I get, like not everybody can, but if you're gluten-free, it's just kind of one of those unwritten rules that you kind of have to accept that your food cost is just going to be much higher than the average person.
Yeah. The next thing that we did like about Malaysia is that in general, there isn't the same tipping culture that we have back home. So it's nice to be able to go out to a restaurant and, they've got, any applicable government taxes, but also any service charge already, automatically just attached to the bill, whether it was, I think, 10% or 15%, and it's just across the board, order off the menu, here's your bill, and that's what you can expect to pay. And I don't know about you, Cor, but I like that I find the tipping culture in North America in general, Canada and the United States, has gotten really out of hand, where these suggested minimum tips now can start at 20%, depending on the restaurant you go to, even if the service isn't great. And honestly, it's just really frustrating to deal with that kind of culture. I would much rather see restaurants actually pay their employees, a livable wage, even if that means that the prices on the menu maybe go up a little bit, but just so that it's just predictable and much easier to deal with.
That was always something that I struggled with in Canada because I find it stressful because you're like, how much do you tip? Here, you just don't need to worry about it. So it's really nice.
Yeah. And that's not to say we didn't tip extra if there was particularly excellent service. But I feel like that's what tipping should be, is a reward for, going above and beyond. Not something that,
is expected.
You're expected to pay a 20 or 25% tip just because, even though your service was mediocre or in some cases even bad. Which, to be fair, we didn't really get bad service at all in Malaysia, I don't think.
No, the service industry is way better. I don't know if any of you watching have experienced Southeast Asia, but the service industry in Southeast Asia, they take it really seriously and they're very polite and they just seem to want to go above and beyond every single time, and it doesn't seem to matter who you are or anything like that. So it's just, it was refreshing.
One thing to note, don't just sit there after your meal, expect them to bring the bill, because they won't. They're going to wait till you ask for it.
Yes.
So you do have to ask them to bring you the bill at some point.
But yeah. The next thing that we really enjoyed is the cheap Grab rides. Now with Grab rides, we asked, when we first got there, we asked a couple of people with regards to tipping, because the Grab rides, after you're done the ride, it'll ask for a tip. And we did ask, I think 3 or 4 locals, and they're like, no, don't. It seems to be something that Grab is trying to implement. I mean, if you get a really good Grab driver, we did tip if we had somebody that was really chatty or
really extra friendly.
Or we just clicked with, we did tip. But on the whole, we just generally did not.
Yeah. So the Grab app it says right on there that 100% of the tip goes to the driver, but we did talk to a couple, and that doesn't seem to be the case. It seems like Grab is taking a pretty sizable cut of that tip as well. So maybe, if you do want to make sure your tip goes entirely to the driver, tip in cash and not through the app, that might be a little better off, because then your driver's actually going to get more of that money.
Now, on the flip side, Grab rides, the thing to note is over on this side of the world, safety isn't quite to the standards of Canada. There was more than a couple of cab rides where getting the seatbelt was next to impossible, so we didn't end up wearing a seatbelt.
Like they would purposefully have the seatbelt
like
in the back
behind
seat.
the seat.
Yeah, like rigged so that they're unusable, which makes for a little nerve-wracking of a ride, especially because those drivers also tended to not be great drivers, fairly aggressive, fairly abrupt braking, and so, yeah, there's some close calls.
But that's just part of being over here. You just kind of have to go with it.
And the other thing on the con list for Malaysia specifically, Grab and Gojek in general are great platforms, really easy ride, hailing platforms. They're convenient, they're relatively very cheap and affordable. But in Malaysia in particular, we found we ended up having to wait a lot longer than usual for a Grab to even pick up your ride and then actually show up to pick you up. Multiple times, we were waiting 15 plus minutes for a driver to arrive to our pickup point, which is on average the longest we've had to wait in any country for a ride-hailing app. And also, when we were in KK, coming back from the Sepalok, Kinabatangan River Safari, when we came back to the airport, that was the first time where, for like multiple times, and also not just for us, but our new friends that we made there on the way back, couldn't even get a Grab ride.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. So they were so busy that there were no drivers available, and the app would cycle through waiting for a driver, and then it would just cut off and fail because no one was available. And we tried that a bunch of times, and couldn't actually get a ride. So that was the one time we actually had to go back into the airport and pay a little bit extra to take one of the local airport taxis, which we generally try to avoid. So
that's just part of the experience, but I totally forgot about that.
Not a common occurrence, but it did happen a few times.
The next thing that we liked about Malaysia is the cost of living. Coming from Canada, we knew the cost of living in Southeast Asia was lower, and Malaysia definitely held that to be true. I will let him speak. He's more of the numbers guy, so...
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to get into specific percentages or anything like that. Suffice it to say, Canadian and the US dollar as well, of course, goes a lot further in Malaysia than back home. And unless you're in a really touristy area, and even then when you're in a touristy area, the prices might be a little higher, but it's still going to be cheaper than what you would pay back home. Now, if you get off the beaten path, get away from those tourist areas, and get yourself out into the more local areas, costs drop dramatically. You can get really great meals for a lot less, and it is very possible to live very well eating out 3 meals a day for under $20, like $15, $20 per person would be more than sufficient if you're eating like a local. And that you definitely couldn't eat out 3 meals a day for that amount of money back home. One of the things, though, that we didn't like in general about Malaysia was we did notice more trash and garbage everywhere on the streets, in particular. Kuala Lumpur wasn't as bad, but I found Georgetown and Kota Kinabalu to be a lot worse for that, which was unfortunate. Just a lot of garbage, a lot of plastic garbage, and we're not even talking garbage washed up on the shores at the beach, which you can't hold the country accountable for that because that's washing up from the ocean from wherever else in the region. But even just on the streets. A lot more garbage than I expected to see. Having come from Singapore, having gone to Hong Kong for a bit. We've been in Thailand, we've been in Vietnam, and I feel like there was more trash on the streets in general than I'd expected.
I would have to parrot that. One thing I did notice was the lack of garbage cans. Now, I'm not talking like out on the street or anything like that. There was like, every time we went to a mall, trying to find a garbage can was really hard. And I know that they have garbage issues, and I don't know their system very well, so I don't know what they do with the garbage. So that could be part of it, but it is just a really unfortunate thing, and it doesn't seem like the locals seem to have a lot of knowledge about that, because we did see it time after time of locals just dropping garbage as they're walking. And I'm talking like water bottles,
Plastic bags,
whatever they're holding, just drop it and keep walking. So it did result in a lot of garbage, and it definitely not clean.
No, and to me that's just heartbreaking, because Malaysia is a beautiful, beautiful country. So to see its own people just literally walk, down the street, finishing their beverage and just dropping the container as they walk along, that's heartbreaking to me to see that, because you guys, like, it is a beautiful, beautiful place, and it could be just so much more beautiful with just some changes to those kind of systems to be able to, help control that amount of waste. But
yeah, that seems like a government thing that needs to change, and we're just mentioning it. We're not trying to change the world or anything,
because we can't.
It's just something that we truly noticed.
Yeah.
One of the other things that we didn't exactly love was the lack of walkability. Now, this was more prevalent in Georgetown, but also in Kota Kinabalu. So one of the things, like just trying to get to the grocery store, they have sidewalks, but 99% of the time they were blocked off by cars, motorbikes, even the shops themselves. So you end up walking in the streets anyway. And the streets themselves were very narrow.
Especially in Georgetown, yeah.
That probably is a product of when it was built. It was probably built long before cars were even a thing, so nobody anticipated the cars being as wide as they are.
Yeah, it's an old city, and it shows in the street structure, very, very narrow, very hard to walk. And the other thing that, especially that I noticed, is if you have any mobility issues in a town like that, we saw a handful of people in wheelchairs, for example, being pushed in wheelchairs. Even if you're parents with a baby stroller, some of these sidewalks were very hard to navigate. Even if it was a straight sidewalk, there would be just lots of steps and cutouts and things like that, where it's just not walking down a flat, straight sidewalk. And so if you were having mobility issues, it would be really, really hard.
Yeah. If you're older and have mobility issues, do take that into account. It's not a walkable city. So, you can always take a Grab and stuff like that, but it is going to take a longer time to get anywhere.
Yeah. Didn't notice as many issues in KL.
KL was very walkable for the most part.
Besides the traffic.
At least where we were.
Yeah.
And we did kind of explore KL to the best of our abilities, and we did a lot of walking, but where we were in particular, we could get to the grocery store. There was 2 or 3 grocery stores that were very much close to us, and it was sidewalks all the way there and back, and they weren't blocked off or anything like that. KK was also more difficult to get around. We could make it to the grocery store, but if we wanted to wander beyond that, we ran into the same scenario as Georgetown, where there was motorbikes parked on the sidewalks and stuff like that, and you end up walking in main traffic, and it was a lot busier there. So
yeah, the motorbikes, I think that's just an issue all over Southeast Asia, not unique to Malaysia, but when you've got that many motorbikes, I guess people have to park them somewhere, and the sidewalk is where that generally happens.
Yeah.
The next thing for things that weren't necessarily the greatest, bathrooms in public spaces, when you're sometimes at the mall or, whatever, just be warned.
Yeah.
They can be a little sketchy.
So if you're not in like a really touristy area, like Petronas Towers, KL Tower, stuff like that, those are really touristy. They're really clean. You don't have to worry about that. Get outside of that, and I got to the point where I wasn't touching anything. Like I would kick the door closed and kind of like try to hold it closed while I went to the bathroom because it was kind of scary. I know maybe I'm just too much of a pansy, but there's one thing I like is a clean bathroom.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, first world problems, right? Like
Yes.
we are very lucky to come from a part of the world where we come from, where those kind of standards are definitely a little bit higher. But yeah, a couple times I'd walk into a public bathroom and everything is wet, like wet. You walk, the walls are wet, the toilet, and the walls of the cubicle are just covered in water, and you don't know if it's water because they just hosed everything down or something else. Just saying, be warned, and just be prepared for that. What we generally tend to avoid when we're walking around, on the streets on those kind of days, no open-toed shoes. We wear, we're currently wearing zero shoes, and they're barefoot shoes, like, minimal support, like our support, that sort of thing. But also they're fully waterproof, which definitely makes that kind of day a little bit more pleasant if you're walking through mystery puddles.
Yeah. The number of times I walked into a public bathroom where it was in a mall and it smelled like an outhouse, more times than I can count. So it's not the most pleasant.
So the final thing on our list of things that, not necessarily things that, we didn't like, just things that caught us off guard, is the lack of hot water. So all the places that we were staying would have hot water in the showers. They would have like little those little hot water tanks, like hot water on demand for the shower, which is fantastic. We've never had any issues there. What caught us off guard is that both the bathroom and the kitchen sinks would just have one water temperature, and that would be tepid. Not hot at all, no hot water, period. Not even cold water, which was something that honestly I took for granted coming from Canada and having nice ice cold, drinking water straight out of the tap. But yeah, that did cause some challenges.
The hardest part was cleaning dishes. It's a lot like camping. So we got to the point where we were boiling water
in a kettle, yeah.
In a kettle, and just like washing our dishes that way, because washing a oily pan without hot water, nearly impossible to get it clean. We're used to camping. It's not new to us. Just it's a little extra work. And also one thing that we took to is buying bleach and making sure that we had that on hand, so that if we were feeling at all uncomfortable with like the cleanliness, we could bleach the counters, stuff like that.
Yeah. A lot of times we would be cooking chicken and fish and things like that. And when you don't have hot water to properly wash the dishes after, raw chicken, of course, you don't want salmonella poisoning or worse. So yeah, a little bit of a small bottle of bleach from the grocery store, so at least we could disinfect everything properly.
So yeah, that is one thing that I've literally always taken for granted. I assumed it would be no different here. We've learned our ways, and it seems like it's very, very common throughout Southeast Asia, because we just booked a place in Vietnam and it's going to be the same.
Yeah.
So now we know how to handle it. But
and now you know as well.
Yeah. I think that's like our top list when it comes to mind of like what we've learned.
Yeah, I think that pretty well covers it. Bottom line, what'd you think of Malaysia overall?
I absolutely loved Malaysia. I wouldn't go back to Borneo for such a long time, but beyond that, I would 100% go back.
Absolutely, agreed. I loved Malaysia. It was beautiful. There's lots to see and do. The people are amazing. The food is fantastic. And 100% we will be back.
Yeah. And we hope that you found something useful in here. If you did, let us know in the comments.
And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. And we'll leave it there. So thanks very much for following along on our adventures in Malaysia. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit the thumbs up to like the video and make sure you subscribe.
And not that this was an adventure video, but we do hope that you'll join us in other videos to continue with our adventures. Until then, stay curious and keep exploring.